good of anybody. We're gonna stick together just like it used to be. When you side with a man, you stay with him, and if you can't do that, you're like some animal. You're finished.
Cowboys, outlaws, and endless duels. But what if I told you the most violent westerns had scenes so shocking that audiences fainted in theaters? From Clint Eastwood ghostly revenge stories to Italian directors turning cowboys into horror nightmares, these films rewrote cinema with blood. Guns didn't just kill here, they exploded across the screen in shocking slow motion. And wait until you see the last film. It's been called the grimmest western ever made. Here are 9 violent legends of the West. Let's move on to number 9, El Topo, 1970. Few westerns are as shocking or as bizarre as Alejandro Jodorowsky's El Topo, often hailed as the very first acid western. Released in 1970, this film mixes surrealist imagery, psychedelic philosophy, and some of the bloodiest duels ever filmed. Jodorowsky himself plays El Topo, a black-clad gunfighter wandering a desert wasteland. But unlike Clint Eastwood's cool cowboys, El Topo challenges grotesque masters in duels that spill oceans of fake blood. What made it infamous? The sheer strangeness. One duel involves shooting the hands off a religious zealot. Another pits him against a sharpshooter who sculpts bullets into works of art. The violence isn't just random. It's grotesque and allegorical, soaked in Catholic imagery and existential despair. Critics at the time were horrified, but it quickly became a midnight movie sensation in New York, championed by John Lennon, who reportedly helped fund Jodorowsky's next film. El Topo didn't just break Western rules, it burned them. It's equal parts spaghetti Western, exploitation gore-fest, and spiritual fever dream. And its influence stretched far. Quentin Tarantino, Nicholas Winding Refn, and countless grindhouse directors cite it as an untouchable benchmark of cinematic strangeness and savagery. Next up at number 8, The Wild Bunch, 1969. When The Wild Bunch hit theaters in 1969, audiences had never seen anything like it. Sam Peckinpah loaded the screen with over 90,000 rounds of blank ammunition, making it one of the most bullet-saturated movies in history. The film follows aging outlaws in 1913 Mexico, but it was the violence that shook Hollywood to its core. Blood squibs exploded in slow motion. Peckinpah used 7 cameras simultaneously to capture carnage from every angle. The climactic shootout lasts nearly 5 minutes of nonstop mayhem and racks up over 200 on-screen deaths, an unheard-of number for the time. Critics called it orgiastic violence. Audiences walked out, and the MPAA nearly slapped it with an X rating. Yet war veterans praised its realism, comparing it to the brutality of Vietnam, then raging in real life. It was so controversial that Mexico initially tried to ban it, calling it an insult to history. But The Wild Bunch went on to redefine cinema violence. Instead of clean, heroic cowboy duels, Peckinpah showed guts, gore, and moral decay. Today, historians call it the movie that killed the classic Western and birthed the modern, blood-soaked anti-Western. Coming in at number 7, The Great Silence, 1968. Most Westerns show dusty deserts, but Sergio Corbucci's The Great Silence placed its violence in the frozen Alps. Released in 1968, it follows a mute gunslinger, Jean-Louis Trintignant, battling bounty hunters in a snowbound wasteland. But this isn't your usual good versus evil showdown. Corbucci made the violence political, reflecting the turmoil of 1960s Europe, brutal, cynical, and cold as the snow itself. The film shocked audiences with its bleakest of endings. The hero is killed, the villains win, and innocent townsfolk are slaughtered. The producers even filmed an alternate happy ending for US release, but Corbucci refused to use it. The original cut is pure nihilism. Its gunfights were revolutionary too. Corbucci used unusually loud, echoing sound effects and lingering close-ups on bloody wounds. Critics compared it to a horror film. The Italian press called it cinema without mercy. And the stats? Dozens of deaths, gallons of fake blood, and a chilling score by Ennio Morricone that Quentin Tarantino later recycled for The Hateful Eight. For decades, The Great Silence was banned in several countries for being too violent and depressing. Today, it's considered one of the most savage and brilliant spaghetti westerns ever filmed. Let's move on to number 6, Keoma, 1976. By the mid-1970s, the spaghetti western was fading, but Keoma came charging in like a dying genre's bloody swan song. Starring Franco Nero, the blue-eyed gunslinger who defined the era, the film tells of a half-Native American Civil War vet returning to his plague-ridden hometown, only to find it ruled by his own corrupt brothers. Director Enzo G. Castellari pulled no punches. Inspired by Sam Peckinpah, he filled the movie with slow-motion shootouts filmed from 6 angles at once, horse stunts that injured animals, Italy later banned them, and bloody squibs exploding like fireworks. Critics counted over 70 on-screen deaths, many lingering in balletic gore. The violence wasn't just random spectacle, it was drenched in symbolism. The plague victims reflected Italy's political unrest in the 1970s, where riots and terrorism plagued Rome. The haunting soundtrack, with ballads sung like ghostly laments, gave Keoma the feel of a funeral for the whole Western genre. Though ignored in the US, it became a cult hit in Europe and was later hailed as the last true spaghetti western. Without Keoma, the blood-soaked legacy of Italian westerns might have ended with a whimper, not a roar. Coming in at number 5, Django, 1966. If one film can claim to have drenched the Western in blood, it's Sergio Corbucci's Django. Released in 1966, it shocked audiences worldwide. Franco Nero's mysterious drifter drags a coffin behind him. Inside is not a corpse, but a machine gun, which he unleashes on entire armies. The movie was so violent that it was banned in the UK until 1993, nearly 30 years later. Italian censors called it a carnival of cruelty. And they weren't exaggerating. It includes one of cinema's first ultra-graphic mutilations, where a man's ear is sliced off and shoved into his mouth. A scene so shocking it predates Tarantino's Reservoir Dogs by decades. Stats? The body count reaches over 180 deaths, with many massacred in single bursts of automatic fire. The film spawned more than 30 unofficial sequels across Europe, some with titles like Django the Bastard or Django Kill. None matched the original's impact. Corbucci became infamous as the other Sergio, rivaling Leone in brutality instead of grandeur. Django not only gave the world a new Western anti-hero, but it redefined cinematic violence itself, raw, grotesque, and unforgettable. Next is number 4, Four of the Apocalypse, 1975. Lucio Fulci, the Italian master of gore, known for zombie films like Zombie 2, shocked audiences when he turned his eye to the Wild West. Four of the Apocalypse begins innocently enough. 4 misfit petty criminals are exiled from a town, but the frontier quickly becomes a nightmare when they encounter the sadistic bandit Chaco, played by cult icon Thomas Millian. Fulci brought his horror sensibilities into the Western. Graphic beatings, sadistic torture, and blood-soaked gunfights were shown with a cruelty usually absent from cowboy films. Critics note that it has over 50 violent deaths, and some of its images, like pregnant women brutalized and corpses left to rot, were so extreme that it was cut by censors in several countries. It was also highly unconventional. Instead of lone gunslingers, the heroes are fragile outcasts, a gambler, a drunk, a prostitute, and a card sharp, who stumble through the wilderness in search of survival. With dreamlike imagery and psychedelic touches, Four of the Apocalypse is now hailed as one of the defining acid westerns. Its brutality shocked spaghetti western fans, but also cemented Fulci's reputation as a director who could turn even the Old West into a haunted slaughterhouse. Sliding into number 3, Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid, 1973. Sam Peckinpah, the so-called Bloody Sam of Hollywood, was already infamous for pushing violence on screen. The Wild Bunch had scandalized audiences just 4 years earlier. In Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid, he revisited America's most famous outlaw tale, but drenched it in betrayal, melancholy, and gunfire. The movie tells the tragic story of lawman Pat Garrett, James Coburn, hunting down his old friend Billy the Kid, Chris Christopherson. Peckinpah's slow-motion shootouts, over 25 on-screen deaths, were graphic even by 1970s standards. Squibs exploded like fireworks, spraying crimson across the desert. Bob Dylan, who also acted in the film, wrote the soundtrack, including the iconic "Knockin' on Heaven's Door," which immortalized the dying gunfighter motif. Production was chaotic. Peckinpah fought constantly with MGM over censorship, pacing, and edits. His original cut was butchered, removing much of the violence and poetic despair he intended. Decades later, restored versions revealed just how bleak and bloody his vision was. A world where friendship is betrayed not by choice, but by the inevitability of survival. Today, the film is considered a flawed masterpiece, a ballad of dying legends told in bullets, blood, and betrayal. Now on to number 2, Cutthroats 9, 1972. If most spaghetti westerns lean toward gritty adventure, Cutthroats 9 was something else entirely. A nihilistic nightmare dressed in cowboy hats. This Spanish paella western, directed by Joaquin Romero Marchand, followed a chain gang of sadistic convicts whose wagon is ambushed in the snow. Shackled together, they descend into savagery, committing acts so grotesque that censors demanded cuts across Europe. The violence was staggering for 1972. Throats are ripped open, bodies burned, flesh flayed, all shown with shocking detail. Many critics said it felt more like a slasher movie than a western. The Spanish distributor even leaned into this, releasing it in US grindhouse theaters with a fake gimmick. Audiences were promised a blood-stained bag at entry. Interestingly, the production reused Spanish Civil War locations for its wintry setting, and the actors endured freezing conditions during shooting, adding to the realism of their suffering. Though obscure today, the film has achieved cult status among horror fans and Western enthusiasts alike. It blurred the line between cowboy grit and horror gore long before Tarantino or Robert Rodriguez made careers out of doing the same. Finally, number 1, High Plains Drifter, 1973. Fresh off Dirty Harry, Clint Eastwood directed and starred in High Plains Drifter, a western dripping in supernatural overtones and shocking violence. Unlike John Wayne's patriotic frontier tales, Eastwood's story painted the West as hell itself. He plays a nameless drifter who arrives in a corrupt town and unleashes terrifying vengeance on both bandits and the cowardly townsfolk. The violence is relentless. Whippings, rapes, and shootings staged with brutal honesty. The finale sees the entire town engulfed in flames, painted blood red, while corpses litter the streets. Audiences were stunned. It was less John Ford's heroic West and more like a biblical punishment. The controversy was huge. John Wayne personally wrote Eastwood a letter condemning the movie as an insult to the pioneers. But Eastwood shrugged it off, and the film became a box office success, earning nearly $15 million, a hefty sum for 1973. Many critics now view it as a proto-horror western, where the drifter may literally be a ghost returning from the grave. High Plains Drifter changed the western forever, turning the genre from patriotic myth into a nightmare of guilt, blood, and fire. Which of these do you think is the most violent, and which one would you never dare to watch? Thanks for riding through the bloodiest westerns of all time. If you love these shocking stories, hit like, tap subscribe, and don't miss our next deep dive into cinema's wildest scandals. Stay tuned, more untold movie secrets are coming soon.